All right, folks, let's take a deep dive into the polling data for the 2024 presidential election, but we're going to add some layers to our analysis. Instead of just reporting the raw numbers, we're going to adjust these figures based on the polling errors that we witnessed back in the 2020 election. Now, you might be wondering why this is essential. In 2020, the polls were off, particularly when it came to the Democratic candidates. We saw a pattern where key battleground states consistently showed the Democrats performing better in the polls than they actually did on Election Day. This misleading portrayal created a false sense of security for many voters and campaign strategists. By correcting for those past inaccuracies, we can develop a clearer and more accurate picture of the current electoral landscape. And what we find might surprise you. It appears that Trump is in a potentially stronger position than a lot of people are willing to admit. So as we inch closer to Election Day, having a better understanding of these adjusted numbers is vital for interpreting how competitive this race truly is. Let's break this down into manageable sections and focus on the states that are truly competitive. The swing states that could ultimately decide the election's outcome. There's really no need to get bogged down in the solidly red or blue states. We know how those are likely to turn out. The drama lies within the battleground areas, and it's in these states that we'll find the crucial votes. Just like in previous elections, the Midwest remains a key player. States that once formed a solid Democratic blue wall, like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, have become battlegrounds that could swing either way. If Trump can manage to reclaim these states, it significantly clears his path to victory. With that said, let's dig into the polling data and see what it looks like when we factor in those polling errors from 2020. First up is Minnesota. This state has a long-standing Democratic lean. In fact, it hasn't voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 1972. Currently, Kamala Harris has a lead of just 4.7 in the polling averages. That's hardly a comfortable margin. When we apply the 6.2-point polling error we observed in 2020, that leads to Trump actually surpassing Harris by 1.5. Just take a moment to think about that. A state that has been reliably blue for over 4 decades could potentially flip to Trump. This isn't merely speculative. We have historical context. Back in 2016, Hillary Clinton won Minnesota by a nail-biting margin of only 1.5. So it's entirely plausible that Trump could take this state in 2024. With that in mind, we're placing Minnesota into the lean red category on our electoral map. Before we move further, let's clarify how I'm categorizing these states. If a candidate has a lead of 10 points or more, that's classified as solid. If the margin is between 5 and 10 points, we call that likely, which suggests that the state is probably safe for that candidate, but not a guarantee. A lead that falls between 1 and 5 points is considered lean, indicating that, while it could go either way, it currently trends toward one candidate. Finally, if the margin is less than 1, we designate it as tilt, meaning the race is extremely tight and could easily go to either candidate. This system helps us visualize just how secure or competitive a state is for each candidate. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Next on our list is Iowa. Currently, Trump holds a 4 lead in the polling averages. When we apply the adjustments for polling errors, his lead balloons to an impressive 10.2. This significant margin aligns with Trump's past performance in Iowa. He won this state by 9 points in 2016 and by 8 points in 2020. Clearly, Iowa has leaned Republican for a while now, and these new numbers suggest that this trend will likely continue. Consequently, we're placing Iowa firmly in the solid red category. Now let's turn our attention to Wisconsin, which is arguably one of the most pivotal swing states in recent elections. Currently, Harris has a razor-thin 0.3 lead in the polling averages. However, Wisconsin has been a state where polling errors have been particularly pronounced. In 2016, the polls predicted Hillary Clinton would win by 6 points, yet Trump emerged victorious. In 2020, polling once again overestimated Democratic support, showing Biden winning by 6.3 when he only managed a 0.6 win. After adjusting the 2024 polling data for those past errors, we find Trump leading Wisconsin by 5.9. That's a significant swing, indicating that Wisconsin could very well return to the Republican fold in this election. Given this shift, we're moving Wisconsin into the likely red category. Moving on to Michigan, another critical battleground state. Biden won this state by a narrow 2.8 margin in 2020, but Trump is currently leading by 1 in the polling averages. When we adjust for polling errors, Trump's lead increases to a noteworthy 7.2. This indicates a significant shift and suggests that Michigan could flip back to Trump. Remember, in 2016, he only won Michigan by a slim 0.2, making it an incredibly tight race. However, the fact that he now shows a wider margin after adjustments points to the possibility of Michigan moving away from the Democrats in 2024. Therefore, we're classifying Michigan as likely red as well. Next, let's examine Ohio, another essential swing state. Ohio has been trending Republican for several election cycles. Trump won Ohio by 8 points in 2020 and by 9 points in 2016. Currently, he holds a 7.4 lead in the polling averages, but after adjusting for the polling errors, that lead grows to a striking 13.6. This margin indicates that Ohio is firmly in Trump's corner, so we're categorizing Ohio as solid red on our map. Now let's turn to Pennsylvania, often regarded as the tipping point in presidential elections. Trump currently holds a slim 0.3 lead in the polling averages. However, after adjusting for polling errors, his lead expands to 6 points. This is especially significant since Pennsylvania is part of the blue wall that Trump famously breached in 2016. In the previous election, Biden was expected to win by a comfortable margin, but he only managed to take the state by just over 1. If Trump maintains these adjusted leads, it's very possible Pennsylvania could flip back to red in 2024, so we're placing it in the likely red category. Let's shift gears and examine Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. Currently, Harris is leading by a substantial 10 points. However, after accounting for the polling error, her lead narrows to 3.8. That's still a lead, but it's significantly tighter, prompting us to categorize Nebraska's 2nd district as lean blue. Next, we'll take a look in New York. Harris is still expected to carry the state, but by a much narrower margin than what Democrats typically enjoy. She's leading by about 12 to 13 points, but after adjusting for the polling error, her lead drops to 7.3. While New York remains a blue state, the fact that Harris' lead is considerably diminished is noteworthy. We're classifying New York as likely blue rather than solid blue. Now, let's discuss New Hampshire. Harris currently leads by 7.4, but after adjusting for the polling error, her lead shrinks to just 1.2. New Hampshire was exceptionally close in 2016, with Clinton winning by only 0.37. The state is still leaning blue, but it's a lot tighter than many might assume. As a result, we're placing New Hampshire in the lean blue category, but it's teetering on the edge of tilt. Next is Maine. Currently, Harris is leading by 11.7, however. After adjustments, her lead falls to 5.5. We're moving Maine into the likely blue category, reflecting its tendency to lean Democratic, but with a tightening margin. Now, let's shift to the Sun Belt, which has become a battleground in recent elections. These states, which historically leaned Republican, saw Biden flip some of them, like Georgia and Arizona, in 2020. Of this time around, though, Trump appears to be gaining ground in the Sun Belt, while Harris struggles to match Biden's performance from 4 years ago. Starting with Virginia, where Harris currently leads by 6.4. Once we adjust for polling errors, her lead diminishes to a mere 0.2. That's an incredibly thin margin, leading us to categorize Virginia as tilt blue. Harris might be at serious risk of losing Virginia, a state that has recently trended Democratic. Next, let's take a look at North Carolina, a state that Trump won in both 2016 and 2020. He's currently leading by 1.2 in the polling averages, but when we adjust for the polling errors, that lead expands to 7.4. Thus, we're classifying North Carolina as likely red, following the trend we've seen with Trump in this region. Georgia, a state that Biden flipped in 2020, is now looking more favorable for Trump. Currently, he holds a 2.7 lead in the polling averages. After adjusting for polling errors, that lead balloons to 9.1. This is a considerable margin for a state that was considered a toss-up just 4 years ago. As a result, Georgia is firmly in the likely red category. Right now, let's shift our focus to New Mexico. Harris is leading by 5 in the polling averages, but after applying the same adjustments for polling errors, her lead shrinks to just 1.8. This puts New Mexico in the lean blue category, but it's much closer than many would anticipate. Finally, we have Arizona and Nevada, 2 states that are critical to the Sun Belt battleground. In Arizona, Trump currently leads by 1.1, but after correcting for polling errors, his lead grows to 7.3. This indicates a significant shift, moving Arizona into the likely red category. In Nevada, Trump's lead of 0.5 expands to 6.7 after adjustments, prompting us to also categorize Nevada as likely red. So, what does all this data mean when we step back and look at the bigger picture? After making these adjustments for polling errors from 2020, Trump is projected to secure a whopping 322 electoral votes. That's not just a win. It's a decisive victory by modern standards. It underscores just how competitive this election has become. Even with all the noise and controversy surrounding Trump, he is positioned quite strongly as we approach Election Day. This path to victory appears clear, and these adjusted numbers reveal that the race is much tighter than many might have initially assumed. In summary, the battleground states are shaping up to be fiercely contested, and the polling data reflects a race that is much more competitive than what many narratives would suggest. This election is going to be a nail-biter, and I'll be here to keep you updated on all the developments. If you found this deep dive into the numbers informative, be sure to comment, and subscribe for more insights. This election is definitely one to keep an eye on, and I'll see you in the next video.